Discouragement is a part of life. From young teens to adults of mature years, we are all susceptible. And Satan can use this tool at any time. Discouragement's universal. It happens to everybody. You're not alone. It could come at any time, at any moment. And I didn't draw this picture. I think Eddie did. It's really beautiful, that stick figure there. He dropped his ice cream. If anybody's ever gone in and had $4, because that's what Brahms is for a double dip now, and took it outside and dropped it, you're sad, you're mad, you're discouraged. But then look at the cloud above his head too. What we have to realize is that discouragement is a part of life. And there's no one immune to it. Elders, deacons, preachers, the rich, the poor, the old, the young. Whether you're a Christian or not, it's something that's going to happen. It is an emotion we all feel, some stronger than others. But we have to be careful so that we don't allow Satan to use it as a tool. Some of the things we could be discouraged about. You're doing all the right things. And you do them over and over, but you get poor results. You work extra hard, and you seem to get no progress. And it weighs on you. It's like a cloud over your head. You practice and give your all, but lose almost every game or every competition. You do this over and over and over. And I'm not a Cleveland fan, but if you recall, Cleveland didn't win a single game last year. And their payroll was right in the middle of the NFL, hundreds of millions of dollars spent. And what was their result? 0-16. That can be very, very discouraging. Other things that come up and that we sometimes forget about, but you study, especially the kids in school. You read something, you prepare for it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, but you don't pass the class. That can be very discouraging. Or recently I've heard a couple, they go to take their driver's test that they paid money for and spent 6 months practicing, and they didn't do a proper 3-point turn. They didn't do parallel parking right. So they've got to do it all over, and that can be very, very discouraging. These things are little things that weigh on you, and there's nothing you can do about it. But we are also being attacked, and let's not be hiding the fact that we are at war. Right now, there are institutions and organizations that we revere and we respect that are being torn apart. Marriage, from the beginning of time, was between a man and a woman, period. No discussion. God said what it was, and He laid it out. But that's not what's being forced down our throat. Now, as we just saw in the state of Oregon, not only that, but men and women are no longer called men and women because on their ID cards they could be gender neutral. You don't have to say what you are anymore. And California and Oregon have now asked for the states to put on their driver's license, not a man, not a woman. And now the police, of all people, are saying, so what are we going to do? We're going to call it and say, well, this person, we can't say it's a man or a woman, just committed a crime. That's 6'3", weighs 250 pounds, and has short hair. We can't say that. So common sense is thrown out the window. But they're being attacked. Boy Scouts are no longer Boy Scouts. At least for the next couple of years, maybe they'll get to finish. But the laws come down, and they're going to allow girls inside. And now they're going to allow homosexual leaders to be. Fortunately, the PACs around here, or the district has voted it out right now, but there's already lawsuits against it. Respect for the offices or an office of authority, whether it be a sheriff, whether it be a governor, whether it be the President of the United States, there is no more respect. Law enforcement. You get an argument with a police officer, you go up and you fight him, and oh, well, he pulled me over. Yeah, I was committing a crime, but I didn't want to go to jail, so that's why I tried to pull his gun and shoot him. You see in this over and over and over, and it can bring you down if you let it. What's sad is that we know that today 115 people will die of opioid addiction. Today, 115 people. That's the average. Today, 14 teenagers will commit suicide. That's the average. We have a choice, and this is what's great. God has given it to every one of us. We can be discouraged, but here's the key. We remain in control, and we overcome it. Or, the opposite, discouragement, we allow it to consume us. We accept the fear, the doubt. It has control. And that negativity not only takes over your life, but you don't realize the ripple effect and the contagiousness you can have over others. Just because you're Christian, and this is shared, I know Eddie's had it in class before, does not mean our physical life's going to be better. As a Christian, we're not looking at the physical life. We're looking at life eternal. Life is hard. When he was a baby, his mother died. His father was a pretty old guy, and even though he was famous, he wasn't a very good father at all, and he was kind of a bad reputation. His brothers hated him. They mistreated him. Finally, they betrayed him and sold him into slavery. He was torn from his home. He became a slave. He had no rights. Then he was falsely accused. There wasn't even a trial, much less a fair trial. He was thrown into prison, and there he was forgotten. If anybody ever knew about a hard life, it was Joseph. We think about the coat of many colors, but look at his overall life, how hard that was. When he was 7 years old, his family was forced out of their home on a legal technicality. As a boy, he had gone to work to help support his family. At the age of 9, his mother died. At 22, he lost his job as a store clerk. He wanted to go to law school, but his education wasn't good enough. At 23, he went into debt to become a partner in a small store. At 26, his business partner died, leaving him a huge debt that took years to repay. At 28, after courting a girl for 4 years, he asked her to marry him. She said no. At 37, on his third try, he was elected to Congress. But 2 years later, he failed to be reelected. At 41, his son died. At 45, he ran for Senate and lost. At 47, he failed as a candidate for vice president. At 49, he ran for the Senate again and lost. At 51, he was elected President of the United States. Many of you know this was Abraham Lincoln, considered one of the best and greatest presidents in our country's history. Not only do we have physical life challenges, Paul tells us and warns us in Ephesians 6:12, for we wrestle not only against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. He's telling us, we are at war. Be prepared. Guard yourself. The first example we have tonight, I want to read, is in Jeremiah. And it's going to be 20. Jeremiah 20, if you want to follow along. Verses 1 through 13. Now Pashur, the son of Immer, the priest, who was also chief governor in the house of the Lord, heard that Jeremiah prophesied many things. Then Pashur beat Jeremiah the prophet, put him in the stocks that were in the high gate of Benjamin, which was by the house of the Lord. And it came to pass on the morrow that Pashur brought forth Jeremiah out of the stocks. And Jeremiah said unto him, the Lord hath not called thy name Pashur, but Magar-Missabib. For thus saith the Lord, behold, I will make thee a terror to thyself, to all thy friends. They shall fall by the sword of their enemies. Thine eyes shall behold it. I will give all Judah into the hand of the king of Babylon. He shall carry them captive into Babylon, shall slay them with the sword. Moreover, I will deliver all the strength of the city, and all the laborers thereof, and all the precious things thereof, the treasures of the kings of Judah, will I give to the hand of their enemies, which shall spoil them, and take them, and carry them to Babylon. And thou, Pashur, and all that dwell in thine house shall go to captivity, and thou shalt come to Babylon, and there you will die. And you'll be buried there, you and your friends to whom thou hast prophesied lies. O Lord, thou hast delivered me, and I was deceived. Thou art stronger than I, and I prevailed. I am in derision daily. Everyone mocks me. For since I spake, I cried out. I cried violence and spoil, because the word of the Lord was made a reproach unto me, and a derision daily. Then I said, I will not make mention of him, nor speak any more in his name. But his word was in my heart as a burning fire shut up in my bones. And I was weary for forbearing, and I could not stay. For I heard the defaming of many, fear on every side. Report, said they, and we will report it. All my familiars watched for my halting, saying, peradventure he will be enticed. We shall prevail against him. We shall take our revenge on him. But the Lord is with me as a mighty, terrible one. Therefore my prosecutors shall stumble, and they shall not prevail. They shall be greatly ashamed, for they shall not prosper. Their everlasting confusion shall never be forgotten. But, O Lord of hosts, that triest the righteous, seest the reins in the heart, let me see thy vengeance on them, for unto thee have I opened my cause. Sing unto the Lord, praise ye the Lord, for he hath delivered the soul of the poor from the hand of the evildoers. When we come across a situation that's bad, now this one's bad. Jeremiah was sent to speak a sharp message from God to this rebellious people. These were God's people, but they were rebellious. And they started obeying him. But a son to the high priest and the chief governor of the temple arrested him, beat him, put him in stocks, and put him in stocks at the high gate for everyone to see him and to mock him and make fun of him. He was in deep distress. If anyone's discouraged, think about that. He was in deep distress, enduring physical, emotional, and spiritual anguish in front of his people, his own people that he just talked to, that he thought was coming back to the Lord. We have to deal with honestly. Look what Jeremiah did in verses 7 through 9. He was deeply angered. He felt deceived and all alone. He was mocked for doing the right thing. Whenever we are troubled, no matter what it is, we need to go to God first. That's what he did. He was angry. He didn't hold back. God, he says, I feel deceived. I feel alone. Why is this happening to me? We also know of the two examples of Jesus Christ, our Savior, when he was in Gethsemane and on the cross. Obedience, verses 9 through 10. We, if we're trained and have it inside of us, and we're abiding in Christ, should have the same fire in our bones that he did. He said, but, I am angry, but the truth and the righteousness are in my bones as a fire. They were driving him to do the right thing. He knew he had to continue his preaching and not stop. One of the sad things about the people that we read about that are opioid or commit suicide or put themselves in a position and others in harm is that they feel that they're alone. We should always remember we are never, ever alone. In verses 11 and 12, Jeremiah tells us that God is not only going to be prevailing, but he's going to win. When discouragement, because we're alone, what happens? People pull it inward. Our problems, our frustrations, our situations, they're inside, ready to explode like blowing up a balloon full of hot air. But instead of looking inward to us, we need to look upward. Look up to God. Because the knowledge of God and his power, only that will give us the courage, the valor, in Texas, the guts, they call it, the strength, the tenacity, the endurance to handle what Satan is throwing at us. We're told in Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And last, what Jeremiah tells us to do at the very end is what we can do every day. Verse 13, he said, in his despair and in his discouragement, what has he said? He's turning it to joy. His defeated attitude is turning to triumph. His dismay is turning to courage. And he says, sing to the Lord. Give praise to the Lord. Now, why would you think he'd want us to do that? Think about that for a second. Because when we sing to the Lord and give him praise, these songs on the board that Nathan led are not just mere songs. If we're really saying the words and understanding the words, there are meanings with the words. By praising God, we are out loud recognizing that God has the right to rule and reign in our lives. We've been having a class on authority the last couple months. Wednesday night. God created us. He's the ruler. He makes the rules. God has given us His Word. We have the way to get back and to Him. His ways are higher and always will be higher than ours. He wants us in this praise, as we're praising God, in doing so and turning to Him inside, we're accepting what's going on. And no matter what happens, we can give praise to God. It refocuses your thought from the little problem you've got here to what God wants us to do. The praise is there. And we know in Acts 16:25, Paul and Silas were in jail. What did they do? They sang. Why did they sing? Giving praise to God. They took the focus off themselves and turned it to God. About 10, 12 years ago, Emmett told me about this songbook, or about this book that went and gave us all the history of the songs that we sing. And so, hey, that's right, that's great, that's right. Well, Ruthie bought this for me for my birthday after that. And I read through it, and I've used some of these in class material before, really thinking what the people are going to when they were writing it at that time. In 1830, he was renting a one-room per night in a shack. He was all by himself. He was 24 years old. He felt tired. He was sick. He was lonely. He was working 12 hours at a dry goods store, trying to put in 2 to 4 hours because he got accepted at Yale, going to school, and teaching at a girls' school every other hours that he had to help pay for the money that he needed for school. But he got sick, and he's by himself in the room. And he started shaking, and he started crying. He didn't know what to do. And he looked over, and there on the nightstand was a Bible. And he opened it up, and said he started reading about 1 Peter. And he read 1 Peter, and he read it again, and then he started putting these words down to pen called a poem. He called it a poem at first. But it was a personal prayer for renewed zeal and courage. He wrote it down, kept it in a piece of paper, and put it in his pocket. 2 years later, Lowell Mason, a friend of his, came to him and said, I know you write a lot of poems. I'm looking to put some poems and make songs out of them. Do you have anything? And he said, no, I'm too busy now. I have nothing. He said, wait, I've got this that I've kept here folded up. He opened it up, and he read it. He said, I recall that I wrote the verses with tender emotion. There was not the slightest thought of writing for anyone else to see, because this was from my own deep soul pining. He kept writing, so I kept writing the hymn and didn't know that this hymn would soon become used in Christian worship. Ray Palmer did go on to do many good things. He graduated school, he got married, had kids, but he's going to be remembered because he wrote the words to the song, My Faith Looks Up to Thee. He did it in a moment of deepest despair, when physically he was exhausted, had nothing to turn forward to, and looked sideways and knew he needed to go to God. There's some great stories in here where they came from, so it's good to understand what we're singing, where they're coming from. But on Jeremiah, the praise and prayer to God, also when we give Him the praise, we start focusing on what He wants us to do, not what we want to do. Next example, we got to study Nehemiah in the elder and deacons class, and if you're a manager, if you're going to be a leader of your home and your family, if you have a family, executive position, Nehemiah is one of the best books to read that God has given us about a man who's given a very tough task and how he handled it. Nehemiah was on a mission to rebuild the walls around Jerusalem. He writes to us and tells us that it was God who put the idea in his heart and to make this journey. Upon arriving in Jerusalem, he surveyed the whole city and he assessed the whole damage. And if you read the scripture, you get an idea that it was more like a recon. He didn't want people to know what he was doing at the time because there were outside enemies that did not want this wall built. He puts a plan into motion to rebuild the walls. He starts rallying the people, going to the local leaders. He tells them the plan that God had put in his heart. he shares his vision, and soon the people start working together. But Nehemiah tells us that right when they got about halfway, discouragement started showing up. So we turn to Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 6 through 16. I'm using my phone, so I'm trying to be quick. Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 6 through 16. So we built the wall, and all the wall was joined together unto half thereof, for the people had a mind to work. But it came to pass that when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabians and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were made up, that the breaches began to be stopped, then they were very angry, and they conspired all of them together to come to fight against Jerusalem to hinder it. Nevertheless, we made our prayer unto God and set a watch against them day and night because of them. And Judah said, the strength of the bearers of burdens is decayed and waxing, and there's much trash and rubbish everywhere. So we're not able to build the wall anymore. And our adversary said, they shall not know, neither see, till we come in the midst amongst them, and will kill them, and cause them to quit working. And it came to pass that when the Jews which dwelt by them came, they came and said unto us 10 times from the places where we're going to be working unto us, that they are going to come get us. They started threatening them. Therefore said I, in the lower places behind the wall, and in the higher places, I even set the people after their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked, and rose up and said to the nobles, to the rulers, and to the rest of the people, be not ye afraid of them. Remember the Lord, which is great and terrible, and he will fight for your brethren. And you will fight for your sons and your daughters and your wives and your houses. It came to pass when our enemies heard that it was known unto us, and God had brought their counsel to naught, that we returned all of us to the wall, everyone to his work. And it came to pass from that time forth that the half of my servants were working, and the other half of them held both the spears, the shields, the bows, the harbigions, and the rulers were behind all the house of Israel. So we read here some good examples what the causes of discouragement were. There was fatigue that set in. He had rallied the troops. Everybody got all excited. They were fired up. And they went out and they got about halfway done and they got exhausted. When you are mentally and physically wore out, it's hard to do your work. Fatigue will set in if you're truly working hard. Fatigue can set in at any time. In this case, we saw that it came about halfway through their work. Now, you buy a new car. How long is it before that car loses its newness? Is it when all the trash from the kids starts piling up knee high? Is it when you don't start washing it every 2 weeks? The newness wears off and you start losing excitement with it. You start a remodel at a home. You get all excited, you get all the tools, you get going, and the work starts going, you get halfway there, and then the work seems to slow down. This is one we face, it happens a lot, but we can't be discouraged either, as we start a new Bible class. And things seem to be going the first couple times. And then the third time, well, they push it back. And the fourth time, there's another excuse. Then they come back and they only have half the time. These things this fatigue can get on you. You can't let it happen. Loss of vision. These people started making excuses. I know you've never heard this. I didn't get my work done because all these excuses started coming up. But in this case, there was so much trash, and they call it rubbish, in the way, they couldn't even get the work done. By looking and focusing on the rubbish and garbage in our lives, it can discourage us. If we're focused on the bad stuff, it's going to keep us from doing the good stuff. It keeps us from hitting our main objections and our main goals. And as we studied this morning, the Laodiceans and also in Matthew, we're told that the cares of the world can choke us, cause us to be in a position where we're complacent. We're neither hot or cold, and we know what the result of that was. Lack of confidence was another major cause of discouragement. And it is a major contributor to discouragement in many ways. we're not able to build a wall. Okay? They said because they started out strong, but now they've lost their heart. They're not able to do it. They can't finish what they started. They're feeling failure. They're allowing the outside influences of these other people and these threats scare them, get in their way, keep them from doing what is right. Do we ever blame ourselves when something goes wrong? You do something and you don't get the reaction you're supposed to get. Do you blame yourself? Do we blame others? Do we start complaining? Or we go to the source and take care of it? The last one, cause of discouragement, was fear. They were scared. The threats and dangers were there. They started listening to all these people outside, but they're the ones that didn't want the wall built. They quit listening to God. First, there was ridicule, we're told. Oh, you guys are trying to do this. It's not going to happen. You can't get that wall up. Then there was criticism. You're not doing it correctly. It's going to fall down. It's going to be unsafe. Then finally, there were actual threats. If you read it, there were threats against them. And no one likes that. And it can produce fear and an excuse, paralysis by analysis, an excuse to stop working and do what you know you're supposed to do. Now, we have to be careful who we listen to, because I know some people in here, and we've gone through it. Hey, my dream, I want to be a doctor. Oh, that's great, but you know, you've got 16 years of school you got to go through, and I hate school. How did that come across to that person? Is that uplifting or is that discouraging? That's just one of the examples, because I don't think I can handle 16 years of school, and I'm being honest, that's hard when you think about it. But be careful who you associate with, because their negativity will rub off on you. And their ridicule can be contagious and affect you from doing the right thing. But what's great about this is Nehemiah also gives us the cure for this discouragement. In verses 13 through 16, I'll read again. Verses 13 through 16, I had Luke read, because think of what he's saying here, telling me. Therefore said I in the lower places behind the wall, on the higher places I set the people after their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and rose up and said to the nobles, to the rulers, to the rest of the people, be not afraid of them. Remember the Lord. He is great and terrible. They're nothing. Fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, your houses. And it came to pass when enemies heard this and known us, God brought their counsel to naught, and we returned to the wall, everyone to his work. So he sees what's going on. He pulls the people off the wall, spreads them out. He knows they need rest, both mind and body. He stopped them and put them into what we would call support groups. It's pretty smart. He started making sure that they were with their families. He wanted to give them a little rest. Same as we see in the apostles in Mark 6, verses 30 through 31, Jesus said, come outside, quit teaching, let's go out here, grab your food, read that. He wanted them to get away from the crowds, recharge your batteries. Sometimes you need to get away, you need to have rest. Reorganize and prioritize. Nehemiah put them in small groups, as I said, mostly with families, because it was their loved ones. He wanted them to realize and focus on, these are the people that he wants you to protect. They're your people. They're your blood. He was not going to give up on the goal. And at the same time, he's pretty smart. He's also allowing them to start unifying again together. What's important? What's important to us? Is it the family? Is it our brothers, our sisters, our wives? It should be. He had them not spread out anymore. His point, remember the Lord, be not afraid. Nehemiah reached out to everyone, but he didn't start with just anybody. He started with the leaders. He wanted the leaders to buy in and have skin in the game. He wanted them to reaffirm what was there, because they knew what God had said and what God wanted. God is great. He is terrible. That word, you look it up, You should fear and revere Him, making you shake in your boots, realizing how powerful He truly is. But He also said, count your blessings and all the goodness, because God is with us. We are never in this life alone. And that needs to be said over and over and over. If a person realizes they're never alone, ever, then they might not do certain things that could harm them or others. Resist the discouragement. Don't give in to it. Fight for it, He says. And who does He say for? He says, fight for your family. Fight for the ones you love. Don't back down. Don't make excuses. Resist this discouragement. Fight for your family. We're told in James 4:7-8 to resist the devil. Submit to God. He will flee. Once again, it goes back to the choice that we have. He said that we can give in and quit, or we realize we're at war, we should fight. And what I like at the very end, he just doesn't leave it there. Okay, that's it. We're done. Get back to work. If you're discouraged, the easy way to get your mind off your own little problems is get back to work or get involved in something that's going to keep you busy. We got our rest, got our strength back. We remembered who we were working for, God. We remember, and our family. And in this case, we looked up and we're only half done. We got a long way to go. But they went back better prepared, because we read in the last verse, Monday, Luke and I are going to do the holding the spears and the swords, and you guys do the work on the wall. And Tuesday, we're going to be on the wall. You flip it back and forth. He split them up. There's going to be half people working, half people security at all times from that point forward. So those working would see that they're protected. And those protected knew who they were working for and protecting. Pretty smart. God gave them the idea. So get back to work. So this is not a message, or wasn't a message, for becoming a Christian, but one more of for ourselves personally as we look in the mirror and the examples that we have. There are many more examples in the Bible, and with Job is a great one, but we realize our lifespan is short. The average age, 70, roughly 70. Okay? And during that lifetime, we must realize we are going to face discouragement. It's going to be there at one time or another. We have a choice. We control it, or we can allow it to consume us. Other things, if you talk to Eric and other doctors, when stress builds up and discouragement builds up, it can lead to ulcers, high blood pressure, heart attacks, among other things, if we allow that to get to a point where it's consuming us. We have to be honest in our assessment. Something just happened. It wasn't good. I'm not happy with the result. Can I change that with God's help? Is it something I really want to change? Am I allowing something small to bring me down, to make me negative to my brothers and sisters or my family? Look at it. What is the situation? Can I change it? If not, ask God, so the next time it comes around, it won't happen that way. You can do that. We should seek seek God's help and advice every step of the way. Every time you come across something, as Nehemiah did, he didn't go to anybody else first. And if you study David in the past, when he was God's, after God's own heart, when anything happened, who did he go to first? He went to God first. He didn't go to his friends or family or anybody else. He went to them first, God first. We need to do the same thing. And we can overcome anything because God gives us that ability. We need to rest. We need to resist the devil. And don't give up. To finish up the lesson, I'm going to read 2 verses. The first one is going to be found in Psalms 9. If you want to follow along, Psalms 9. This is verses 7 and 8. Psalms 9, verses 7 and 8. Whenever you're down, things are weighing on you, there's a dark cloud over your head, read Psalms 9, 7, and 8. But the Lord shall endure forever. he hath prepared his throne for judgment. He shall judge the world in righteousness. He shall minister judgment to the people in uprightness. And last one we find is Matthew 24. In Matthew 24, verses 13 and 14. Matthew 24, verses 13 and 14. But he that shall endure until the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. So as I said, this was not a lesson of the major steps that we call of salvation that are very important. But you know in your heart, if you've been studying, you're ready to become a Christian, and now is the time to turn yourself to God. If you let the cares of this world choke you, the discouragement get you down, and you need the prayers of the congregation, please come now as we stand and sing the invitation song.